They found him under a big cottonwood tree. His Levi jacket and pants were faded light blue so that he had been easy to find. The big cottonwood tree stood apart from a small group of winter-bar cottonwoods which grew in the wet, sandy arroyo. He had been dead for a day or more, and the sheep had wandered and scared up and down the arroyo. Leon and his brother-in-law Ken gathered the sheep and left them in the pen at the sheep camp before they returned to the cottonwood tree. Leon waited under the tree while Ken drove the truck through the deep sand to the edge of the arroyo. He squinted up at the sun and unzipped his jacket. It sure was hot for this time of the year. But high and northwest the blue mountains were still deep in snow. Ken came sliding down the low, crumbling bank about 50 yards down, and he was bringing the red blanket. Before they wrapped the old man, Leon took a piece of string out of his packet and tied a small gray feather in the old man's long white hair. Ken gave him the paint. Across the brown ringed forehead he drew a streak of white, and along the high cheekbones he drew a strip of blue paint. He paused and watched Ken throw pinches of cornmeal and pollen into the wine that fluttered the small gray feathers. Then Leon painted with yellow under the old man's broad nose, and finally, when he had painted green across the chin, he smiled.
Send us rain clouds, grandfather.
They laid the bundle in the back of the pickup and covered it with a heavy tarp before they started back to the pueblo. They turned off the highway onto the sandy Pueblo road. Not long after they passed the store and post office, they saw Father's spoke car coming toward them. When he recognized their faces, he slowed his car and waved for them to stop. The young Price rolled down the car window.
Did you find out Teofilo?
Good morning, Father. We were just out to a sheep camp. Everything is okay now.
Thank of God. Of that, Teofilo is a very old man. You really shouldn't allow him to stay at the sheep camp alone.
No, he won't do that anymore.
Well, I'm glad you understand. I hope I see you at Mass of the week. We missed you as last Sunday. See if you can want Teofilo to come with you.
Bye.
Luis and Teresa were waiting. The table was set for lunch and the coffee was boiling on the black iron stove. Leon looked at Luis and then at Teresa.
We found him under a cottonwood tree in the big arroyo, near to the sheep camp. I guess he sat down to rest in the shade and never got up again.
Leon walked toward and the old man's bed. The red plaid shawl had been shaken and spread carefully over the bed, and a new brown flannel shirt and pair of stiff new Levi's were arranged neatly beside the pillow. Luis held the screen door open while Leon and Ken carried in the red blanket. He looked small and shriveled, and after they dressed him in a new shirt and pants, he seemed more shrunken. It was noontime now because the church bells rang, the Angelus. They ate the beans with hot bread, and nobody said anything until after Teresa poured the coffee. Ken stood up and put on his jacket.
I will see scavengers, only the top of layer of soil is present. If I can be ready before dark.
Leon nodded his head and finished his coffee. After Ken had been gone for a while, the neighbors and clanspeople came quietly to embrace Teofilo's family and to leave food on the table because the gravediers would come to it when they were finished.
The sky in the west was full of pale yellow light. Louise stood outside with her hands in the pockets of Leon's green army jacket that was too big for her. The funeral was over, and the old men had taken their candles and medicine bags and were gone. She waited until the body was laid into the pickup before she said anything to Leon. She touched his arm, and he noticed that her hands were still dusty from the cornmeal that she had sprinkled around the old man. When she spoke, Leon could not hear her.
What did you say?
I said I had been thinking about something.
About what?
About the price of sprinkling holy water for Grandpa, so he won't be thirsty.
Leon stared at the new moccasins that Teofilo had made for the ceremonial dances in the summer. They were nearly hidden by the reed blanket. It was getting colder, and the wind pushed a gray dust down the narrow Pueblo road. The sun was approaching the long mesa where it disappeared during the winter. Louis stood there shivering and watching his face. Then he zipped up his jacket and opened the truck door. I'll see if he's there.
Ken stopped at the pickup at the church, and Leon got out, and then Ken drove down the hill to the graveyard where people were waiting. Leon knocked at the old carved door with its symbols of the lamp. While he waited, he looked up at the twin bells from the King of Spain with last sunlight pouring around them in their tower. The priest opened the door and smiled when he saw who it was.
Come in. What brings you here this evening?
The priest opened the door and smiled, walked toward the kitchen, and Leon stood with his cap in his hand, playing with the air flaps and examining the living room. The bronze sofa, the green armchair, and the brass lamp that hung down from the ceiling by links of chain. The priest dragged a chair out of the kitchen and offered it to Leon.
No, thank you, Father. I only came here to ask you if you will bring your holy water to the graveyards.
The priest turned away from Leon and looked out the window at the patio, full of shadows, and the dining room windows of the nuns, clustered across the patio. The curtains were heavy, and the light from within faintly penetrated. It was impossible to see the nuns inside eating supper.
Why did you tell me that he was dead? I could burn the last drill anyway.
It wasn't necessary, Father.
The priest stared down at the scuffed brown loafers and the worn hem of his cassock.
For a Christian burial, it was necessary.
It's okay, Father. We just want him to have plenty of water.
The priest sank down into the green chair and picked up a glossy missionary magazine. He turned the colored pages full of lepers and pagans without looking at them.
I know you cannot do that, Leon. That I should have been the last funeral mass in them.
Leon put on his green cap and pulled the flap down over his ears.
It's getting late, Father. I have to go.
Wait!
He left the room and came back wearing a long brown overcoat. He followed Leon out the door and across the dim churchyard to the doorsteps in front of the church. They both stopped to sit through the low adobe entrance, and when they started down the hill to the graveyard, only half of the sun was visible above the mesa. The priests approached the grave slowly, wondering how they had managed to dig into the frozen ground. And then he remembered that this was New Mexico, and saw a pail of cold loose sand beside the hole. The people stood close to each other with little clouds of steam puffing from their faces. The priests looked at them and saw the pile of jackets, gloves, and scarves in the yellow, dry tumbleweeds that grew in the graveyard. He looked at the red blanket, not sure that was small Teofilo, wondering if it wasn't some perverse Indian trick. Something they did in March to ensure a good harvest. Wondering if maybe old Teofilo was actually at the ship camp curling the ship for the night. But there he was, facing into a cold dry wine and squinting at the last sunlight, ready to bury a red wool blanket while the faces of his parishioners were in the shadow with the last warmth of the sun on their backs. His fingers were stiff, and it took him a long time to whisk the lid of holy water. Drops of water fell on the red blanket and soaked into their icy spots. He sprinkled the grave, and the water disappeared almost before it touched the dim, cold sand. It reminded him of something. He tried to remember what it was, because he thought if he could remember, he might understand this. He sprinkled more water. He shook at the container until it was empty, and the water fell through the light from the sundown like August rain that but the sun was still shining, almost evaporating before it touched the wilted flowers. The wine pulled the price brown Franciscan robe and then swept away the pyramid and powder that had been spreading on the blanket. They lowered the bundle into the ground, and David imposed down the stiff pieces of the new rope that were tied around the end of the blanket. The sun was warm. The highway that is bound lane was full of headlights. The priest walked away slowly. Leon watched him climb the hill, and when he had disappeared within the tall, thick walls, Leon turned to look up at the high blue mountains in the deep snow that reflect a faint red light from the west. He felt good because it was finished, and he was happy about the sprinkling of holy water. Now the old man could send them big thunderclouds for sure.